Friends, as I had promised earlier, today I will discuss in detail as to why America is losing all wars, why it starts a war, destroys a country, but it finds it difficult to wind up the war, despite having their defense budget, which is more than the next 10 countries put together, despite having the best technology, best equipment, and I can assure you that their soldiers and their officers are also equally good in terms of combat experience. So therefore, there are fault lines and fault lines lie elsewhere. It's not only me who is saying it. There is a strategist, Sean McFate in USA, who has written a book as to why West is losing all wars. And I had a personal conversation with him as well. So I must confirm that yes, there is a serious thought and people are analyzing as to what is wrong with the conduct of war by America. The first basic reason is that their strategy is always wrong in some manner or the other. They fix a political aim and then they keep deviating from that aim. Similarly, they also find it difficult to define an end strategy or end state and an exit strategy. And there are many examples like that. Also, the problem is that are they fighting a just war? Because if you fight a just war, then the dedication and the commitment of the local people and of the citizens of America is slightly different. Now let's take the examples of various wars. Vietnam War, obviously Vietnam did not pose a threat to America, nor did Iran, nor did Afghanistan, nor did any other country like Libya. None of them posed a threat to America. So the wars were for reasons other than the threat to America or security to America, except the example of Afghanistan, where Al-Qaeda did attack them and they had to finish Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda organization was finished in a much shorter time frame, unless their aim changed subsequently in Afghanistan. So like in case of Vietnam, they wanted to check the communism, and thereafter I think they kept changing their aims as well. And then they didn't know. It took 11 years for them to find out that they have not been able to make a headway as far as Vietnam is concerned. Then the second major issue is that they are equipping themselves for a conventional war, assuming that all wars are conventional wars, and everywhere they want to win by only standoff attacks. Why so? Because they want to minimize their casualties, and therefore they are quite hesitant in putting boots on ground, number one. Number two, fighting an asymmetric war, whereas the entire dimension of war in most of the countries has changed. Most of the places they fired, they started off with a somehow conventional bombing, but thereafter they landed up with an asymmetric war, which they were not prepared of, and their equipment is not really designed. Like the kind of damage which the smaller drones have done to them in Iran war is an example of that. Their costly equipment, to neutralize a drone, they used very costly equipment, and they find themselves now in a very difficult situation because of shortage of Patriot missiles and things like that. Now if you take the case of Iraq, the aim was on a wrong intelligence that they have the weapons of mass destruction, which they were never found. They destroyed the country. They thought that they will make it democratic. Now democratic, how democratic they are is a question mark, but the fact is it gave birth to ISIS subsequently. Similarly, in case of other wars, a similar kind of situation happened. Then the third major factor is that they have not used geography to their advantage, and their adversaries used geography to their advantage, which in military we call it as terrain friction. In Vietnam, Vietnamese used the jungle terrain as their terrain friction, which Americans found it very difficult to handle. They were operating from their bases with mass destruction and also finding it difficult to get into hand-to-hand fighting. Similarly, in case of Afghanistan, it was a rugged terrain, and the Afghan tribals, they landed up into the mountainous areas, and they also found some place in Pakistan, which keeps playing double game with the USA, which perhaps USA has never been able to understand the kind of game which they play with them. So that is the second example of their not being able to handle the geography in their favor. And last and most important example is Iran. They have not been able to handle Strait of Hormuz. And it's not that they were not warned. I think well before the war started, Iran had said in no uncertain terms that I will destroy all your bases and I will close the Strait of Hormuz. And it did exactly what it had said. Notwithstanding, a large number of leaders were killed. So in case of Afghanistan, in case of Iran too, the initial political aim was regime change. Subsequently, of course, they can keep changing their voices and changing their aim and changing their goalpost. But then the strategic aim was destroy the nuclear facilities, degrade their missile capabilities, degrade their navy, degrade their air force, which perhaps to a great extent they have done. But they have not been able to obliterate it. The regime is still standing. But when you take the aim of the other side, in most cases, the aim was survival. Vietnam wants to survive. And for Vietnam, it was a just war for survival of the country. Even today, for Iran, it's a just war for survival of Iran. And therefore, when it comes to America, are they fighting a just war? The question is no. So though that makes the stance weaker, that also is a factor in the mind of the people who are actually fighting on ground. That are we laying down our life for our country, or are we laying down our life only for the politician to win some election or something like that? So that's another area which perhaps the America has to think about. Then you take the case of other countries as well, whether it is Libya or Iraq. In both cases, in case of Iraq, Iraq was also fighting war for survival, but of course they couldn't survive in the manner in which they would have liked to. But then you had the country getting into chaos. You had the ISIS there. Same is the case with Libya. Then you had the warlords there. Now you have the Houthis there. So that's how whatever they started off with, it ended into chaos. Although initially they were saying that they are doing it for the people, because the regimes are terrorist regimes and they are very harsh on their people. Similar narrative they wanted to sell in Iran too. But then the fact is, the moment the war started and the kind of bombardment they did, and when the schoolgirls were killed, the whole country got together and the national resolve was that we have to fight it out, whatever it may take. And I think that is the resolve today, and that is the resolve which is disturbing America, because I don't think they can do very much about it. The second, one more factor which is very important is the local population. How do you treat the local population? Now take the case of Vietnam. In Vietnam, when they used the Agent Orange, they destroyed a couple of generations into disability. And Vietnamese can never forget it. When I went to Vietnam and saw their museums, war museums, they had everything to display as to how they beated Americans, but not a single, shall I say, photograph to depict as to how they beated Chinese. So I asked them, why is it that you are only displaying Americans and not Chinese? They said, Chinese never tortured us, number one. Number two, Americans are the ones who used their Agent Orange on us and not the other way around. Same is the case with, you take the case of Iran, or even the moment those schoolgirls got injured, the whole country got rejuvenated to fight America. Initially, they had some problems with the Khomeini regime, but the hatred towards America was no less. So Americans' narrative that we are doing it for you and you do a regime change for your own good, that just didn't take off. So that was another area. So population is again a very important factor, which I think the planners must consider. So these are some of the factors which are not playing in American favor, and I think there are bigger lessons for all the military strategists on this context. Let's take the case of India. We in Himalayas have the advantage of terrain friction. We also have the advantage of terrain friction in Malacca Strait. And therefore, if we use our terrain friction, Shivaji used it very well. If we use our terrain friction to our advantage, I think the superiority of numbers against any of these adversaries or any of these adversaries who they may be planning or who may ever plan against India need to think about it. Same is the case with when it comes to South China Sea. If Americans are thinking that in South China Sea the kind of combat resources, the ground-based combat resources of Chinese are fully applicable, and therefore it may not be easy for them, irrespective of how many war games CSIS does in their favor, to declare America as victor. So I think these are some of the lessons which perhaps Americans must keep in mind, and the rest of the strategists also must keep in mind. The Clausewitz era is gone, and I think having bombers with the kind of air defense density which their major opponents have. Iran was a different case, they didn't have that kind of air defense, but I don't think those bombers are going to work against maybe China or Russia or any other major adversary which has a sizable air defense. So I think there is a lot which needs to be thought as far as the strategy is concerned. I think strategy is the biggest concern for America. Thank you very much.